Have you ever looked at the world, not with your eyes, but with your silence, and suddenly felt like a stranger in your own life? Like everything you once believed was solid had become paper thin? There's a peculiar moment in some people's lives when the ordinary becomes suspicious, when routine loses its comfort, and when answers that used to satisfy begin to feel hollow. It doesn't arrive with lightning or divine visions. It arrives quietly, sometimes during a walk, sometimes in the middle of doing dishes, sometimes while staring at a stranger's face on a crowded train. And that whisper in the background says, "There's more to this than you've been told." This whisper is the beginning of spiritual awakening, not the glamorous kind you see packaged into social media quotes or exotic retreats, but the raw, uncertain kind. The kind no one really talks about because it doesn't feel like enlightenment. It feels more like crumbling, confusion, unearthing. What if spiritual awakening isn't about reaching bliss, but about removing the layers of noise that cover what you already are? The ancient philosopher Heraclitus once said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man." That is awakening. It is not a place, it is a process. And that process happens in stages, stages few speak of because they're not always pretty. They are internal earthquakes, and today, we'll walk through 5 of them. Maybe you're in one right now. Maybe you've just passed through one without knowing its name. Stage 1. The cracking of the illusion. The first stage often begins not with enlightenment, but with disillusionment. Everything feels like it's losing meaning. Relationships become strained. The job that once brought security now brings restlessness. The goals you once chased start to feel like someone else's dream. But the most painful part of this stage is that you can't explain it to anyone. You're functioning, smiling, showing up, but something inside you is flickering like a dying light bulb. This is the stage where the illusions we've inherited about success, identity, faith, family begin to crack. You start to question if the life you built was built for you or by the expectations of others. It's not a breakdown, it's a break open. For the first time, your inner compass begins to pull away from the noise of society and turn inward. But there's no clarity yet, just a knowing that something has shifted and you can't go back to sleep. Stage 2. The abyss of emptiness. After the illusions fall, a strange silence follows. This is the abyss, a place where many feel lost, depressed, or even spiritually betrayed, because no one told you that awakening would feel like loss. You've let go of who you were, but you haven't yet become who you're meant to be. Old identities don't fit, but new ones haven't formed. You feel suspended between worlds. This stage isn't a punishment. It's a purification. Think of it like winter in the soul. Everything dies back so the truth can grow roots. But in our culture of constant productivity and positive thinking, this stage is terrifying. We're taught to chase light, not sit in darkness. But the abyss is sacred. It's where your soul prepares the soil. In this emptiness, you begin to recognize that who you thought you were was just a story. And when that story dissolves, you can finally hear the subtle voice beneath the noise, the voice of your deeper self. Stage 3. The search for soul truth. Once you've survived the abyss, a flame ignites. It's not bright at first. It's cautious, tender, like a child opening its eyes for the first time. This is the stage of seeking. You want to learn, you crave depth, but not the surface-level spirituality marketed in bookshelves and YouTube ads. You want truth. You begin reading ancient philosophies, the Tao Te Ching, Gnostic texts, Sufi poetry. You find yourself in long midnight conversations with people who don't speak in cliches. You're not interested in answers as much as in better questions. During this stage, your inner world becomes vast. You might adopt spiritual practices like meditation, breathwork, journaling, or sacred rituals. but not out of obligation. You do them because something in you hungers for connection to the unseen. You stop chasing validation and start chasing resonance, what feels real, deep, eternal. But here's what no one tells you. Even this stage can become a trap. You can start to collect spiritual knowledge the way others collect trophies. Quotes become armor. Practices become performance. The ego sneaks back in disguised as awakening. And that's when the next stage calls. Stage 4. The humbling fire of surrender. Eventually, the soul gets tired of the chase, even the spiritual one. You begin to realize that awakening isn't about doing more. It's about letting go. This is where the fire begins. The fire of surrender. Everything that doesn't serve your truth starts to burn away. You lose people. You quit jobs. You outgrow environments. But most importantly, you begin to surrender control. You realize that you are not the director of your life, but a co-creator with something infinitely larger. This realization doesn't come gently. It often comes through heartbreak, loss, or radical disruption. Your plans collapse. Your certainties are challenged. And the universe whispers, "Are you ready to trust?" Surrender is not weakness. It is the most courageous thing a human being can do. It is not passive. It's a wild kind of participation. You start to see life not as something to fix, but something to flow with. You stop praying for answers and start praying for wisdom. You trade perfection for presence. And somewhere in the midst of letting go, you discover peace not as a destination, but as your natural state. Stage 5. The integration of light and shadow. You may think that after surrender, the journey is complete. But true awakening doesn't end in blissful detachment. It matures into integration. This is the most misunderstood stage of all. Integration means returning to the world, not as the person you were, but as the person you've become. It's not about escaping the ego forever. It's about understanding it, holding it with compassion, and working with it as a partner, not a master. At this stage, you begin to see both your light and your shadow as necessary parts of your human experience. You stop demonizing your wounds. You stop glorifying only your love and light. Instead, you see how your pain sculpted your depth, how your jealousy taught you about self-worth, how your rage showed you where your boundaries were being violated. You no longer strive to be above your emotions. You strive to be present with them. This is where true wisdom is born, not from rejection of the world, but from reverent participation in it. You realize that awakening is not about being more spiritual than others. It's about being fully human, deeply rooted, wildly aware, radically honest. You can walk through a storm and still carry peace. You can hold space for others without losing yourself. You can sit with contradiction and not collapse. And perhaps most powerfully, you stop seeking a finish line. You understand that awakening is not linear. You don't graduate. You spiral. You loop. You revisit the same wounds, only with more awareness. You pass through darkness again, but now you carry a lantern. You fall asleep again, but now you know how to wake up. The return to the ordinary, but not the same. Once you've tasted all 5 stages, life begins to look ordinary again. But you're not the same person walking through it. Grocery stores feel sacred. Silence feels musical. You listen more than you speak. You feel more than you analyze. You carry less shame and more curiosity. You no longer chase enlightenment. You embody presence. And that, in itself, is enlightenment. In this stage, you may be drawn to creative expression. You write, you dance, you build things, you help others without trying to save them. You share your voice, not to preach, but to serve. You speak less in absolutes and more in metaphors. You're comfortable with not knowing. And you finally understand that the greatest spiritual teachers are not those with followers, but those who walk quietly, listening to the soul of the world. You also begin to see that everyone is in some stage of awakening, whether they realize it or not. Even the most unaware person is on their path, perfectly timed. This gives birth to compassion. Judgment dissolves. Patience expands. You don't need people to change for you to feel safe. You accept them where they are because you've accepted yourself. Why this journey matters, even when it hurts. Why go through this at all? Why let your life get turned upside down, your relationships tested, your beliefs undone? Because somewhere deep inside you, you know that truth is worth everything, that no amount of comfort can replace the feeling of coming home to yourself, that even pain, when held with awareness, can become holy. Spiritual awakening is not a destination you brag about. It's a sacred unraveling, a remembering, a return. And perhaps most beautifully, it's a gift you give to others without even trying. Your peace becomes contagious. Your grounded presence becomes a lighthouse for those still navigating their storms. You don't need to fix them. You simply show them what's possible when a human soul chooses to wake up. So, which stage are you in? Are you just now feeling the crack in the illusion? Are you wandering through the abyss, unsure of who you are? Are you searching for truth, devouring every teaching that touches your soul? Are you being invited into surrender, letting go of who you thought you had to be? Or are you learning to integrate it all, to live in alignment without abandoning the messiness of life? There is no right place to be. There is no timeline, no comparison. Your path is yours, sacred, timed perfectly for your evolution. And the fact that you're even asking these questions means the journey has already begun. A final word from the soul. In ancient Zen teachings, there's a story about a student who climbs a mountain to find the truth. After years of struggle, meditation, fasting, and silence, he reaches the summit and finds an old man sipping tea. The student, desperate, asks, "What is the ultimate truth?" The man smiles and says, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." Awakening doesn't always look like fire and thunder. Sometimes it's found in the softness of the everyday, in being present with a friend, in grieving fully, in forgiving without words, in walking barefoot, in watching the clouds drift and realizing they're not in a hurry, so maybe you don't have to be either. So here's your reminder. You don't need to become anything. You need only remember who you already are. And if that memory feels far away, then trust the process that is pulling you closer. Trust the questions, trust the pauses, trust the ache. And most of all, trust that your soul knows the way back to the truth, even when your mind does not. Welcome to the journey. You've already started it.